Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a few ground rules. All the attendees to the webinar will be on mute until the completion of the talk from the speaker. We will have a Q&A at the end of the talk. You can either type your question in the chat window or do a raise of hands, in which case we will unmute you. I am happy to inform you that we have now reached the 50th webinar in the Samgacchadhwam series. We had to pause this webinar series due to some circumstances, but we will now aim to be regular with this series of webinars. Earlier this year, the government of Karnataka took an exciting step by providing cybersecurity as a specialization option for diploma students. And we at CySecK helped draft the syllabus for this course. For the next 1.5 months or so, we will focus on covering the various topics in this syllabus. Whilst we are sure it will be of assistance to the students who have opted for this specialization, we are nonetheless confident that it will help other students or working professionals who are interested in cybersecurity as well. Cybersecurity is not just a critical domain, but is also a complex topic. We will aim to provide an overview to each of these domains with opportunities for conducting hands-on activities and with some pre or post read to help you to go into further depth. We hope that this will kindle your interest to explore further. The topic of today's webinar is Vulnerability Assessment and Penetration Testing of VAPT Part 2. We had completed Part 1 of this series on Monday, and we had originally planned to hold Part 2 yesterday, but could not do so due to some exigency. And here we are with the second part of this very exciting webinar. Our future webinars are planned on the theme of system security and network security, as you can see in the slide. You can access the previous webinars on the CySecK website as well as on our YouTube channel. I'd like to request all of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It will help you to get to know when new recordings are out, and it will help us to get better traction and visibility. We are planning to conduct the remaining webinars on the topic of network security by Mr. Swapnil Patnikar, which had to be cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances sometime early next year. We will announce the schedule and open registration for the same once the dates are finalized. We request you to please watch the CySecK website for more updates in this regard. Now to today's webinar, which is the second of the two-part webinar, and our speaker, Mr. Nikhil Kulkarni, a security consultant, will provide an overview of the following two topics primarily. First was penetration testing basics, which included understanding burp suite and HTTP protocol basics, most of which was already covered in part 1. And then come the OWASP security vulnerabilities, including different types such as injections, cross-site scripting, CSRF, security misconfigurations, and broken access control. I will now go over the protocol to be followed for today's webinar. This is the scheme of webinar and assessment. Today's webinar, which is number 50, will be delivered by the speaker, Mr. Nikhil Kulkarni, which will be followed by Q&A. There will be the link to the assessment that will be provided at the end of today's webinar. Please note that this assessment will be kept open for only 60 minutes and will be followed by webinar feedback. There are separate assessments for both parts, and we assume that those of you who attended part 1 on Monday undertook the assessment that was featured immediately after completion of that webinar, and that was kept open for 60 minutes following the same. Likewise, today's assessment will also be kept open for 60 minutes only following completion of the webinar and the Q&A. We request all the participants to please use a Gmail ID to take the assessment, as it is being done through Google Forms. Please do not use multiple mail addresses per participant. This is very important so that it will help you. It will help us to ensure that the certificates are delivered correctly and that they go to the correct participant. Participants who get 10 or more answers correct out of 15 will be eligible for a certificate. I'd also like to add here that upon completion of the assessment, we would also like some feedback from you, the participant, about how we can improve the content and delivery of our webinars. And so there'll be a small questionnaire comprising of both qualitative and quantitative questions aimed at gathering effective webinar feedback. We request you to complete that as well. It is now time for me to introduce to you our speaker for today. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Nikhil Kulkarni, who's a security researcher and an international security trainer. His areas of interest include web application penetration testing, mobile application security, and machine learning. He has presented his talks at international and national level conferences and meets such as Nui Duhak Paris, OWASP AppSec, COPON International Cyber Policing and Security Conference, DEFCON Bangalore Chapter, Null Open Security Meet Bangalore, and the Null Open Security Meet Mysuru. He is also a bug bounty hunter and has been listed and acknowledged in the halls of fame of companies such as Microsoft, Apple, Adobe, Nokia, Engine Yard, and Avira Antivirus. He currently also leads the Bangalore chapter of Null Open Security Community. Nikhil has worked with Fourth Wall Security, IGS, and ThoughtWorks. He is an alumnus of the MS Ramaiah Institute of Technology, from where he obtained his BE in Information Science and Engineering from the Visvesvaraya Technological University in the year 2016. You can reach out to him on Twitter. His handle is @NickChills. That is @NickChillz. I will now request Nikhil to please unmute himself, turn on his camera, and to share his presentation. Hello, Nikhil, and welcome to the Samgacchadhwam series 50th webinar.
Hello, Abhishek. Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for bringing me back again here. My apologies that I couldn't make it yesterday due to some unforeseen reasons, but happy to be here again and to continue where we had left in the previous session. I hope you all are excited as much as I am. And yeah, I think without much of the talks, I think we can get started. So just to quickly do a recap of what we had done in the previous session. So we looked over a couple of basics of HTTP as to how the request looks like and how the response accordingly looks like. And also we had looked at a couple of fundamental web application security vulnerabilities, such as cross-site scripting. We had looked at SQL injections. We had looked at command injections and bunch of others, right? So we had touched upon the very basics there, just for us to get a hold of how things really work. And today we'll be looking at a couple of more set of vulnerabilities. Of course, there were quite a few requests that were added in the previous session. I've tried to come up to sort of cater to those requests as well. Yeah, I think without much of waiting, let's get started. I'll quickly share my screen. Let me know once my screen is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Nikhil, it is visible.
All right. Okay, that's great. Okay, so in today's session, we are going to be using this vulnerable web application called as BWAP. It is a web application that is purely built for the sake of us testing it out and trying out different sort of vulnerabilities. Okay, it is out there available on the internet. You can straight away go ahead and download it. It's open source purely, and you can try out different sort of vulnerabilities. So the way this works is it's purely you just go ahead and install it on your Docker machines on your local systems. You create a new user for you to log in, and once you have created, you can use the same, and then you can log in as well. So let's do that for today. All right. So once you log in, you will see a simple portal here. So this portal, describes different set of vulnerabilities that are out there available that you can test out. So you see it's again divided based on the OWASP top 10. You have A1, which is injections. You have other aspects like A2, broken authentication and session management, A3, cross-site scripting, and a bunch of others. Though I think the OWASP top 10 that they are looking at might have been of 2017, but I think it still does give out the main set of vulnerabilities that are out there on the internet. So you can actually go ahead and test out all of these different set of vulnerabilities once you have it installed. So in today's session, we are going to be mainly HTML authentication, cross-site scripting. There is another vulnerability called as IDOR, which is insecure direct object reference. We are also looking at things such as directory traversal and also on a couple of other attacks like XSS. CSRF, sorry. So these are the sort of vulnerabilities that I've listed down here, and I plan to sort of cover today. I hope I'll be able to cover in this duration of time. Other than this, we'll also be looking at this another tool called as OWASP Zap, which is I think very similar to that of Burp Suite, and it has a feature of automating your security scans, across the applications. Okay, so with this, we'll actually get started. So we'll take a simple example today. So we are going to be starting off with HTML injection. Okay, so what exactly HTML injection allows an attacker to do, right? So it usually happens where the user inputs is given in the form of a form field, right? For example, in this scenario, if you see, there is a first name and a last name. So when you type in your name, something like say Nikhil, and say I type in my last name, it says it's simple, welcome Nikhil K, right? Now, what an attacker basically does in an HTML injection is they try to inject certain HTML tags. Okay, so in this simple scenario, let's try out this. Let's try to add the HTML tags, which is H1 for header, the header one tag. So I try to do this and then it does go through, right? Most of the times, if an application is vulnerable to uh, cross-site scripting, it could also be vulnerable to an HTML injection. Sometimes even the vice versa would happen, where HTML injection is possible, and also there could be a possibility of a cross-site scripting vulnerability as well. So just to again bring it back the interactiveness in the session, I want to ask everyone present here, what do you think would be the reason why this HTML injection is possible? Someone who can quickly, take up and answer this. Probably add your answer in the chat. That would certainly help.
Yeah, participants can please post their answers in the chat.
Okay, someone says we are using get method. Uh, okay. So you mean to say if it is done in the post method, it is not possible? No validation in the server end. Yes, that is right. You're right. There is no validation that is happening on the server side. There needs to be a proper sanitization. Of course, you're right. Yes, that is true. Uh, so with that, I think I'll also sort of talk about the other two aspects that someone had mentioned, if it is because of the get method. Not really. Even if it is done via the post method, it is still possible. So let's look at if it is possible via post method. So let's say I go back to the application. It does take some amount of time to load. Let me turn off the camera so that the internet doesn't get affected. Just give me a minute. Let me rejoin this. I think there's some issues on my internet.
Okay.
Okay. Am I audible, Abhishek?
Yes, Nikhil, you are audible.
All right. Okay. Let me share my screen. I hope it works now. Better. Apologies for that. I'll just quickly try and
Dear participants, Nikhil will share his screen soon.
give me 2 more minutes. I should try to fix this soon.
Nikhil will share his screen in a couple of minutes. We request the participants to mute.
Okay. I think I have it ready now. Really sorry for so much of delay. Is my
Yeah,
screen
that's
visible
okay.
now? Better?
Yeah, your
Okay.
screen
All
is
right.
visible. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think the other aspect that we looked at was if it is even possible via post method. So let's try this out. I'll run this via post. So I'll give a simple input here and then try to now run it via the burp suite. So if I do this, so you see that things are being sent over post method. Now, if this is done, so let's try and see if I can make some changes. Sure. I'll try out h1 tags. All right, I'll forward this. It does still work, right? So, the fact that, whether it is get post, so that doesn't really matter. It is purely if the sanitization and the validation is not done, that's where this is quite likely to happen, right? So this is a very simple example of, an HTML injection for that matter. So this is quite widely seen wherever, if the developers tend to miss out on escaping the special characters, or if they're not able to sanitize the inputs that is being, the user inputs that is being given in. All these areas is where it basically doesn't, I mean, this attack, this vulnerability occurs. So in the similar lines, you can try out this particular application for these other injection set of vulnerabilities as well. So I think from here, I think I'll take you to a different vulnerability, which is on the session management or the broken authentication specific issues. So let's try to get into this. So there would be times where you will see quite a lot of applications that have certain pages that are locked and are only accessible to the administrators, right? In those scenarios, there is a possibility that you will have to just look around and try and see how does the logic part of that application really work? How does that application really work in a logical sense, right? So in this particular scenario, again, just a disclaimer that this doesn't really have to work for all the applications that you come across, but a good set of applications does have this vulnerability present. So if you see this administrative portal here, it says that this page is locked. They've also given us the hint saying that check the URL. Uh, if you are trying to look at this particular URL, you will see that the value for admin has been given as 0. Okay, so it is just a switch away to see if from 0 to 1, if you are trying to make a change, will that unlock the page? Turns out it actually does. And this is very a low level of security that they would have set if at all they're trying to do something like this. But again, if I try to change this, I think it would it would still show that the page is locked. So let's try and see if I set the page security to medium, right? Now it says this page is locked. Now I don't see anything over here that basically says that, okay, the admin is the admin flag to be set to 0 or 1. In that scenario, what I'll basically have to check is again, they have given us a hint saying that check the cookies, right? Now, if I in, turn on the interception and then try to run this, it does say that, okay, so in the cookie value, you see that there is PHP session ID that is given, the security level is given, which is fine. Here, the admin has been turned to 0, right? So probably again, if I turn this to 1 and then forward this, then it should still be able to bypass it and then give me access to the locked page. So anyone here who wants to give a mitigation or a recommendation as to how do we want to ensure this doesn't happen? Okay, someone has said, can you please explain sanitization? Yes, of course. So sanitization is purely ensuring that if, for example, let's take a simple input area, right? A text box. So you will see that in a text box, if it is meant for giving the user's first name or the last name, it has to be kept only for that. And if a user tries to give any other inputs, such as a script or a malicious script, or any other HTML specific characters, such as angular braces or slash symbols or these double quotes or all of these needs to be escaped, or these needs to be removed, or these needs to be basically sanitized from those user inputs, right? So that's where the sanitization part comes in. So this input has to be sanitized. Only then there'll be, it would be possible to ensure that these kind of attacks do not happen in the first place. I hope I've been able to answer that. Please explain CSRF which comes in client side. Yes, of course. That is something that I'll be explaining as we proceed further. That is something that I do have as part of the agenda to explain. So can someone tell me how is this even possible? Why was it that this attack was possible? Of course, there was a flag that was set on the client side that said admin to be made 0 or 1. Uh, Anyone who can give a quick answer, and what would be your suggested mitigation? Anyone? All right. Okay, not a problem. Let me explain the reason why this usually happens. Is one, yes, of course, you're trying to sanitize the inputs from the client side, and also you're trying to validate what is being provided by the client side, which is all good. But the other aspect is you do not allow the user the decision-making process to come on to the user side. Such decision making where the flag switches, where basically the user could decide whether if this page uh, uh, could be accessed by them or not, is something that has to be handled on the server side and not on the client side. That's where this really ensures that the the attacker is not able to make any manipulations in order for them to get access to these kind of resources that they're not supposed to have access to. So this is a very simple one, that you would still come across these kind of applications where people, the developers would have developed the application in such a manner that it would they would have all these critical controls to be decided by the client side. You do not really want to do something of that sort, and being a developer, you would want to ensure that it is taken care of, right? It's better if it is kept on the server side. All right. So let's look at other vulnerability, which is very well known, which is the cross-site scripting vulnerability. So let's try and see how this is usually done. So again, this has very much similarities to that of an HTML injection, but this is comparatively a much more advanced than what an HTML injection would do. And in terms of exploitability as well, this is way more, uh, I would say, comparatively dangerous than what an HTML injection would just do, right? So let's try out. So in the similar manner, how we tried out the H1 tag here, let's try out if this works in the first place. We see that this is currently working. So what we can then do is we basically add a script tag to try test out if this is vulnerable to a cross-site scripting request, a cross-site scripting payload basically. Okay, a simple payload would be a script. Okay, a script that you would add to pop up an alert box that says, okay, so this is vulnerable, right? So let's say I type in a simple hello world here and I close the script tag. And now I do this. Now what really happens here is it purely helps us to understand that whether or not if the script is executable here or not. Okay. So right, if this script is executable here, it means that I could bring in other set of malicious scripts into this and then try to execute them, right? I could basically try and see if there are multiple set of JavaScript based things that you could do, in a malicious manner, that could be scripted and then brought in here. All right. So if I click on go, uh, does it do anything? Well, it should typically give okay. This is pretty interesting to see that this doesn't show up any alert box as such, but let's try and see if what would be the reason. So let's say it puts out things in this manner. I think this has got some issue here. But if I try the same on the page where you see an HTML injection, it would still come out. So let's say I try this out. Okay. I think the way I think I had set the security level to medium, and that's the reason why you saw that. But if I go back to this and try out a simple script alert, it should basically work. Yes, it does show up that the script is getting executed. Okay. The whole idea is basically this. That the script needs to get executed, and then it basically shows that your XSS was successful. All right. Of course, the reason why the previous time it did not work is the way things work is when I add in the medium or the high level and then set it, the implementations for this page certainly change. They would have added certainly a certain level of security mitigations for XSS, and that's the reason it didn't pop up. All right. Uh, for now, I just wanted to show with just the low specifically, because I first want you all to understand how things really work at a very fundamental level, and then we can go a further notch higher. All right. Any questions so far on this? Please add your questions in the chat box.
Yeah, Nikhil, there's a question on CSRF. I hope you addressed that.
Yes, I did address that. I do have plans to address CSRF as well in today's call.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we haven't got any other questions. You can please carry on.
Sure, sure. So again, talking about cross-site scripting itself, uh, yes, someone says XSS and HTML coexist. I would agree to an extent. Yes, they do. They do. Yes. So talking about the cross-site scripting itself, can someone tell me what would be the mitigations other than bringing in input validation and input sanitization? Is there any other mitigation that you can think of for cross-site scripting? Is there anyone who can just take a wild guess as well? That would also help. I think I did give that answer while I was talking early on HTML injection. Okay. So of course, one is your validation and sanitization of the user input, of course. The other aspect would be to look at escaping any kind of special characters that are being used if they're not necessary. Something such as your HTML tags. There are other set of advanced level concepts such as content security policy and something around web application firewall. I think this would be covered in the application security sessions, but uh, web application firewall is something that basically ensures that all these kind of payloads are usually taken care of at even before the user request reaches the application. That is one. And there is also something called, as I said, content security policy. It's basically a security feature, that would basically allow which sources are basically allowed to load the content on your website. Like for example, which are the sources that you can allow as a developer, which would basically invoke the JavaScript on your website or these scripts on your website, right? So this is how you can look at mitigating the cross-site scripting vulnerability as well. All right. With that, I think let's try and look at other different vulnerabilities as well. So we looked at broken authentication, we looked at XSS as well. In the similar lines, the XSS reflected could also be done from a post method as well. So we have seen reflected XSS. We can also look at the stored XSS. So let's try to open this up. So this is very simple again. So let's say I try to enter a simple tag and see firstly if it is even possible. Yes, it does. It does show in the header one tag. So which possibly means that it is vulnerable to an HTML injection. Now, if I try to run a simple script, alert, right? So it does basically run this and then show the PHP session ID, which is the cookie document, right? And it also shows that the security level has been set to 0, right? Now, I have a question. You know, if you all remember from our previous session, you would have noticed that I did also show the reflected XSS and the stored XSS. Can someone tell me the difference between these two? Okay, which is easier, XSS reflected or XSS stored? Okay, I mean, it depends. I wouldn't say which is easier. I would say it purely depends on the context. If and how the application is built, and if there is if there is a possibility of finding a reflected XSS, then of course yes, that is doable. In the similar lines, if there is a possibility to find a stored XSS, if the application has those kind of features, then yes, then that's how it would basically work. I wouldn't try to compare which is easier or which is tougher to find between these two. Can someone tell me, yeah, explain the difference between the reflected and stored? Yes. Uh, you say reflected doesn't store anything. Stored saves the script payload in the database or somewhere on the server side. That is exactly true. That is true, right? So that's the major difference between reflected XSS and the stored versus the stored XSS, right? So I mean, the reason you see here is like if I go back to the previous page, right? If I go back to the previous page, and where we were looking at the reflected XSS, you will not see any of the scripts currently running, right? Uh, but if on the other side, if I go back to my other XSS, which is the stored XSS, if I open this up, you will see that this script already getting invoked, and then it says that PHP session ID is equals to this, and etc., right? So it means that this script is stored somewhere in the database, and then it is getting not in the database or somewhere in the application, basically, right? So if it is stored somewhere, only then it will get invoked, right? So the script is getting invoked, whenever I try to access this application. So yes, I think I'm getting the right answers in the chat section. Yes. All right. So let's look at a couple of other different sort of vulnerabilities that are out there available. We looked at A3. All right. Explain broken authentication using burp intruder tab. All right. Sure. I'll do that. Of course. Yeah. Let's look at this first, and then after this IDOR is done, I'll go back to the broken authentication part. All right. So let's look at this one, insecure direct object reference. So the way this works is basically uh, insecure direct object reference is a kind of vulnerability where you are you are directly referencing via the link to a particular object of the application. So it might uh, sound a little confusing. The way this works, let me show it to you quickly. All right. So here, if you see, uh, if I straight away say that, okay, so what happens here is how many movie tickets would you like to order? One order basically would say that one ticket would be priced at say 15 euros. Okay, in this example. So right now, if the interception is off, and I try to buy one ticket, you've bought one ticket, and then you have been charged 15 euros, which is great, right? This is how the usual transaction would work on your websites. But let's say now look at when I try to run the interception. and try and see what really happens in the back end, now you will see that the ticket price is also mentioned over here, right? They've directly referenced it to the object, right? Now, what they're basically trying to see here is the ticket quantity is 1, the ticket price is kept as 15. So if this option to make the changes is also kept on the client side, then it is quite likely that the attacker would basically make use of this, right? So let's say I make it to 1 euros, and then let's say I buy the quantity of 100 tickets, right? Now, if I forward this, what would happen? So basically, you ordered 100 movie tickets. The total amount for from your account automatically charged is 100 euros, right? So basically, you bought one ticket for one euro, right? Which is it's like one of the flaws that could basically allow you to do that. So what is the problem here is they're directly referencing it to to the actual price instead of indirectly referencing it. They are directly referencing it to that object, which is the price value, right? They shouldn't be doing it. That is number one. Second thing, they are allowing the client side to take that decision of the price changes, right? So that is something that needs to be taken care of usually. Now, can someone explain to me what is how you would want to mitigate this? I did mention the mitigations, but how would you want to mitigate it is something if someone can tell me. Okay. Okay. Mr. Sheikh says server validation. Mm, yes, I would agree to that. Any other uh, mitigation that you would want to recommend? All right, not a problem. Sent encrypted. That's a different story. I think the encryption usually would happen on a different layer. This is purely working on the application layer, right? The encryption, which is the one that you're talking, which is the HTTPS SSL, it happens on the transport layer, right? This is purely the thing that you're trying to do here is purely happening on the uh, application layer. User authentication, not really. Let's say if I am authenticated as a valid user, if there is a vulnerability like this, I will still go ahead and exploit it, right? I would still go ahead and try to buy 100 movie tickets for 1 euros each if I get an option, right? Make attributes immutable. Yes. Okay. Someone's asked me if I can explain DOS attack, denial of service. Sure, I'll do that. This Mr. Puneet also says SSL certificate. Not really. As I said, I think SSL comes as part of your transport layer. Just what you're currently trying to do here is purely on the application layer, application and eventually the presentation layer, right? So yeah, I think that was one of the major changes. Encoding, to an extent, no, I wouldn't say encoding would help in any manner here. Encode when you're trying to encode anything, it is also easy for someone to decode it, right? So encoding will not help you in terms of security. All right. So I think let's go back to this. I think someone was asking about uh, the broken authentication. Let me try and see if I can showcase any of that. Right. Let me in the session management. Okay, weak passwords, password attacks. Let me see if this has that option of using uh, the intruder. Right. Enter your credentials, B and bug. All right. Okay. So I think basically the password attack is uh, would again involve the brute forcing mechanism. So All right. So let me try to intercept this request. So, I mean, of course, they have given us the hint that B and bug is the login and password. Let's try out some random ones. All right. Now I'll try to log in into this. On the interception side, if you see here, this is how the details would go. Now, what I would basically do is send it to the intruder. Once I get into the intruder here, I'll have to define which are the parameters that I want to attack. I do not want to attack the form submit option. So I'll clear this. I do not want to attack the PHP session ID here. So I'll clear this part as well. This one also is going to be cleared. So now let's say if I know what the login is and I want to attack the password, I can only keep it for this. So let's say I want to try out for both of these. So what I'll do is go to the payload section. I'll have to search for the payloads. Usually you will get a certain set of payload files that are available, which will have like regularly used passwords, regularly used usernames, all of these. So this will basically help you sort of fasten up the process. So in this scenario, let's take a random set of examples here. Say, all right. So here I'm taking B and bug as other examples. All right. Now, if I go back to the position here, so if I'm going to attack both these aspects, then it's going to take quite some time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this part. All right. So let's say I know the username already. Say I know the username is B. So we also know the password as bug, in fact, but I'm just trying for our understanding, right? So it's going to basically start when we start the attack, it's going to go one after the other and start the testing. Right. This is very weird. I don't get to see this. Okay. Okay. Let me try and see if what was the problem here. It should basically show up all these. This is very weird. I've never seen something like this happen though. But anyways, I think we can come back to this in a couple of minutes. All right. But yeah, I think I'll explain I think someone has also asked, okay, how we can compile the code in Android Studio tool. Well, I think a developer would be a better person to answer that than a security engineer. Okay, the next question is, can you explain broken authentication? All right. Okay, sure. I can certainly do that. Right. So broken authentication is basically a vulnerability which revolves around. Okay, so firstly, we need to understand what exactly is authentication, right? So authentication is basically who you claim that you are, right? So if I say I am Nikhil, so authentication is the process where I am saying that, okay, I am Nikhil and this is my password, and then you authenticate me, right? In the similar lines, authorization is something what I claim to be I am, right? When I say, if say I am a security engineer, like, is there a particular way I could prove my role to this application that I am the security engineer? So that revolves around the authorization bit, right? Authentication is purely got to do about who you are, right? And that's where, if you look at the broken authentication part, so there are multiple ways where the authentication implementation can be flawed. All right. So the way this again really works is, all right. So the way this would work is, so if we take up any of these broken authentication session management, right? It could be something like your bypassing of the captcha, or say if you have a forgot password function, right? And let's say the way the forgot password function is handled is not right. Like for example, so usually when you click on the forgot password, it will basically send you a link to your email address, right? If that link is something that could be manipulated, or it could be sort of, if the code that is generated or that is sent to you, which is something that is predictable easily, then that's a problem, right? Okay, let me try this out if it is possible to see. So let's say apparently you forgot your secret. So let's say I type out some random email address. See, it tells me that your secret is AAA, which is and which is not the right way, right? So my secret is basically uh, is my password, right? So if I'm able to look at someone's email address and then just type it out, and then it shows up that what their password is. Firstly, it is storing the password in plain text, which is totally wrong. Second, it is straight up showing their password, which usually doesn't happen in the real world, but they have bugged it in that manner. Let's look at something else, which could give us a good uh, way to look at logout management, insecure login forms. Let me try and see what this is. Okay. So I think if this is insecure login forms, again, I think this also revolves around brute force itself. Let me try and see. Let me intercept this. If this is something that could be brute forced, most likely, yes, this is what it revolves around. So let's say if I try to send this to repeater, and if I try to send this here, it does give me a 200 OK. But somewhere down, if I scroll down, I think it should give me something like invalid credentials. Yeah, it does say that it is invalid credentials, right? Now, if I again try to put this into the intruder and see if it is possible for me to brute force this and then bypass it, then yes, then again the authentication is flawed. One, the way we can look at it is, when you say authentication, it is not just supposed to be your username and password. It also needs to be some level of two-factor authentication, something like your OTP that is added. That is something that also comes under the purview of your authentication itself, right? In the similar lines, if the mechanism that is being used to authenticate a particular user, other than your usual username password, it could be your straight away logging via mobile number. Say you give a mobile number, and then there's a 4-digit OTP that comes to your phone, and you enter that. Let's say if that is flawed itself, let's say if I can brute force that OTP in such a manner that I could basically, I'm able to get those 4 digits, then that's a flawed broken authentication mechanism. That's a flawed authentication mechanism itself, I would say. I hope I've been able to answer the question that you have asked. Okay. Uh, how we can compile the code in Android Studio tool using Diva Android application. So, okay, all right. So I think the way you can compile the application and all that, I think a developer would be a better person to answer that, I would say. Explain DOS attack. Yes, denial of service is basically a kind of an attack where you're basically, let's say if this application is available, this is up and running. What I would basically do is I would basically send enormous number of packets to this IP address or to this particular application, that the application stops functioning, right? So it means that it is not able to handle these many requests at a given point of time. And what happens is if I'm able to bring it down, the service is denied to the actual legitimate user. Let's say you want to use this application for legitimate reasons, right? You want to log into this and then you want to sort of perform some level of tasks or actions. And if I as an attacker try to bombard this application with enormous amount of requests, right? Let's say if it is only expecting 1,000 requests in a given hour, if I give it like 1 lakh requests in one particular hour, and then if it is not able to handle that, then the application would basically crash. And if you are a legitimate user, and then if you are not able to log into it, then that's purely, it is denying you the service, right? So that's where it comes, the word, the phrase is denial of service. I hope your questions are answered on DOS. Yes. Okay. Cool. I think I'll then proceed with the next set of vulnerabilities that we can certainly look at. So I think we were looking at the insecure direct object reference. Let's try and see if there's any other IDOR that is possible for us to look at. So it says change your secret. Uh, so which basically means that if you know you know it basically allows me to change my secret. So let's say if I type in a random number, random character, and I run the interception as on, and I change this. So what really happens here is it firstly gives out the secret, it also gives out the username, and then action as change, right? Now, I have logged into this account as to this application as the user Nick, right? But it is still giving me the login option as my username as Nick. Does that mean if I change this value to someone else's username, will I be able to make changes to them, to their secret, right? So let me try this out if it is possible. I'll forward this. It says the secret has been changed. The secret that we changed was for a different user altogether, right? So let's go down and see. Let's scroll down and see if roll up, in fact, and see who was the actual. So this is the secret and this is the user. And right, so sorry, I'll close this. The request that we have gotten here is also that things have worked. Yeah, it says that the secret has been changed, right? This was the original request. Post we've been able to edit it. We could see that the login was changed to B, and still it was able to make the change. Now, what exactly was the problem here? Can someone uh, add that in the chat? Using hash value for IDOR mitigation. What if I create that hash value and then send it as a request? Is that possible? What if I create a hash value for the username and then send it as a request? Possible, exactly. Yes, that is still possible. Can someone tell me what would be a mitigation for insecure direct object reference? Can someone answer that? Just a wild guess should also be fine. All right. So I think The way, let me answer this. I think the way we can look at this is one, of course, to validate the user inputs. I think that is one of the very prime thing to be done. The other aspect is to use the access controls, right? So we need to first look at uh, what levels of authorization is allowed for a given user. Let's say if I, as a user, log in, I shouldn't be allowed to make changes, uh, that only an admin is supposed to do, right? So that level of segregation in the access control has to be done. That is number two. The third is to use these random tokens instead of using the actual values of in the request, right? In this scenario, we could see that the username was sent out, right? Instead, they could have used a different kind of a randomized uh, number for the entire request itself, so that the server would have understood what needs to be done, right? Instead of sending things in the raw format, right? The fourth would be to ensure we have like encrypted URLs being used. uh, so that is one mitigation as well. Cool. So I think we have completed on the insecure direct object reference. So let's go back and look at if what are the other set of vulnerabilities that we can look at. Quite a lot of security misconfigurations that are there. So these are pretty straightforward ones. So I do not want to take this up and then spend much time on them. Let me try and see what else I can take up. Okay, so this is something very interesting. So let's take up a directory traversal attack and how this really works, right? So directory traversal is basically a mechanism where uh, you look at you basically look at the directory structure here. One, let's say in the URL that you can see here, that there is a slash and then that it basically says there's a page, and then the page has a certain value, right? Message.txt. Now, when it says message.txt, you also need to look at what else could be brought in here, right? Uh, is there a possibility that there could be some other files that could be tried to access uh, using this mechanism, right? So instead of say message.txt, so what so let's try to use a very obvious one. So I say config.inc.php is one of the files that is like very common for PHP. If we are able to access this internal file, then that's a problem, because if you see here, it contains all the specific details like what is the DB server, what is the username, what is the password. I mean, all these aspects that are already here, right? All the configuration aspects. So we do not really want to, uh, you know, have outsiders have access to these kind of configuration files, right? So that is one. There are other certain internal files if you look at a Linux based architecture, right? So the way this would look at is like, for example, in a directory traversal attack. So when you do a dot dot slash, it basically means that you're going to the previous folder structure, right? So let's say I do something. So I want to get access to something like a file which is quite commonly used in the Linux, is /etc/password. So you can see that /etc/password was easily accessible when I tried to do this, right? So this contains all these specific data which is related to the users that are there on this particular device, right? This is, I think, very peculiar when it comes to the directory traversal. Attackers usually tend to access these kind of files that are present in the application. Uh, so let's see if we could have access to. So for this particular application, let's see if we are able to access certain password specific files, right? So since this is an open source application, the source code of this application is out there available. So I wanted to try out if uh, some internal files are possible. right? So I think it does give out quite a lot of information here if I try to access them. I think I see certain questions already. Am I audible? I hear no voice in the chat. Audible. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Okay. Two-way authentication or an encryption. I think that was the answer. JSW token, or basically JSON web tokens is what you're saying. Okay. So I think that might have been an answer for a different vulnerability that I'd asked. Any questions so far on the directory traversal? When you search for portal.php, is this for the current given application? If yes, let me try and see if this is for this application. Yeah, you do get to see a different details here, but this is again, I think this is purely the details about this application. Like you would have the security level selections and all of those aspects. But try and see what kind of other files that are possible for you to get access to. So basically, you're trying to get a PHP and an internal file, the access to an internal file. So that's a good find, I would say. We're able to sort of get the actual PHP code itself to be shown across. I think that's a great find. Okay, can now someone tell me the mitigations for directory traversal? Yes. Take a wild guess at least, if someone can help me. I did answer for the previous one. If someone can give me the way to mitigate a directory.
Participants are requested to post their mitigation strategies for directory traversal in the chat box.
Encrypting, not really. Strong URL testing. Okay. No, this is something that you're finding while you're testing it out, which is great. But testing will happen eventually, right? Now, from an implementation perspective, let's say from a developer's implementation perspective, what is that you would do? Mr. Sheikh says it is wrapping. Uh, okay, not really sure how that would help. I mean, if you can explain me more, how would you want to wrap it? Okay, so I think I've gotten decent amount of comments on this. So I think one example that one mitigation that I would certainly look at is to have right kind of access controls. So let's say I am a simple normal user, right? So one, I shouldn't be given access to the files that uh, are completely internal, right? So that level of access control checks have to be brought in, number one. The second aspect, of course, is to validate what kind of inputs that the user would give, right? So that has to be validated. The third part is it is better to use certain randomized tokens, instead of user supplied inputs to access any particular files or directories, right? So I think that's a better approach to look at it. Of course, you have like other of your options like using a web application firewall or anything of that sort. How to add user in IAM account? Okay, IAM account, I believe you're talking about AWS IAM. So that's a different concept altogether. Of course, I believe that will be covered in your cloud security session. But I can quickly take a dig at it. Of course, I will have to check if I have access to an AWS account to show you in real. But it's pretty straightforward. You once you get into your AWS dashboard, you'll have to get into your IAM service, and then there you have the option of creating new users, creating new groups, creating new policies, and all of that. That should really help you. So even in the IAM account, you have the option whether you want to give only the dashboard access or you want to give even programmatic access. So that also is something that you can certainly do. All right. Okay. Cool. So let's look at a certain set of other bugs that we can uh, try to hack today. Quite a lot of ones. I'm trying to see which are the ones that are going to be good ones that we can try. So let's try this out. So it says information disclosures robots file. All right. So can someone tell me how has anyone come across robots.txt file on the internet whenever you're trying to browse? No. All right. So you take up any web application or you take up any website for that matter. Every website has got its own, robots.txt files. So let's take up a simple application, uh, something like, let's say, Flipkart.com, right? So if I open up Flipkart.com and then I type in robots.txt, right? So every application would have a robots.txt file, right? So in this robots.txt file, you would basically get to see a certain set of information, right? Sometimes you will also see the site maps of the entire web application. Sometimes you'll also see, what are the different places where the bots are not allowed, all right? So yes, only heard it for it's used for crawling. Yes, Mr. Sheikh is right. So if you look at the robots.txt, the fundamental use for this is the fact that all these bots that you see, the way Google really works is with the help of bots, right? These bots basically crawl and they spider into different applications and then accordingly try to fetch these different set of details and then sort of present it to you on your browser whenever you do a simple Google search. Now, the robots.txt basically tells these kind of Google bots as to which are the places that you're not supposed to go, right? This will ensure that those bots do not get into places where they're not supposed to and fetch out all those details, right? But when you look at these, it basically gives you an understanding as to which are the places that where you can manually try out accessing and then see if you find some information possible, right? So that's more on that's about the robots.txt file, right? So if you look at this, it basically says that disallow slash admin, right? So I don't know if it is even if it's possible for me to access this now. Let's say I try doing this. It kind of does give me certain information and the settings and the control options, right? So in the similar lines, let's say if there are documents, let's try and see if I get to see some information here, right? So it does give me certain PDF access to certain PDF files. Very interesting, right? Now in the similar lines, let's say passwords, which is our favorite, right? Now let me try and see if what kind of details this would give me. Right? There are a certain files that basically have passwords, secrets also that are present for different users, right? One they are storing passwords in plain text. Second is the fact that these are quite available for anyone to access, right? So these kind of information, very unlikely that you will see on a robots.txt file. But yes, there are times where you would actually come across something like these. Is robots and SEO are the same? The robots.txt to an extent is used for SEO purposes, which is search engine optimization. Okay. So yeah, I think so these are the overall set of vulnerabilities that are there currently that you can go ahead and try out. All right. So I think someone was asking me about a CSRF vulnerability. Let me try and see if I could showcase it without uh, the help of taking a CSRF POC generator, because for that I'll need a Burpsuit Pro. Let me try and see if this is possible. All right. Okay, so let me try how this would work. Say I'm trying to keep an interception here. Right? So the interception is happening here. You see that this is sent over a GET request, right? So number one, if it is sent over a GET request, then all I need to do is basically change this particular password and then send it to a different user. Like for example, uh, say I make the password as AAA and then this as AAA as well. And then I basically send this entire request, right? So you copy this and you add it here, right? So you have your entire payload section that is ready here, right? Now what I can do is I can send this as a link to a different user, right? Or my target user, and then make them change their password without their knowledge, right? So I mean, this is a very simple way to showcase a CSRF vulnerability, right? So of course, if they are clever enough, they would actually see the URL. But uh, in most of the cases, people tend to miss out on these areas. But it is quite likely possible that an attacker, if this kind of a vulnerability exists, they can basically go ahead and then do something of this kind of an attack. All right, sorry, it went straight away to Google. So see, if I try to do this, the password has now been changed. So now this particular link could be sent straight away to the target, even in terms via an email or an SMS or a WhatsApp message. All they need to do is click that link while they are logged in to the application on the browser, right? So most likely, so if I'm logged into this particular application here, if I open up a different tab and then if I try to access this application, I would automatically get logged in, right? That's all. The reason behind that is there is something called as same origin policy. What same it's SOP. It's called as SOP, which basically means same origin policy. So same origin policy, in a very nutshell, I would say it defines that if the requests are being generated from a single browser or a single machine, a single browser specifically, then the server would trust the browser because it's already authenticated in the first place. So just to simplify it in a better manner, since I've already logged into this browser using on one tab, if I open up another tab and then I try to access the same particular application, you will see that it is taking me straight away to my profile. It is not asking me to log in again, right? So the reason behind that is same origin policy. Because this browser is already authenticated, it will not ask me to log in again if I open up here. So that's the reason why this kind of attack is prevalent. So if I open up a new browser and then I type this out and I say the password being something like this. All right. If I click on, sorry, I think I'll have to make a minute change over here. All right. Let me make this change here. All right. Now, if I click on this, the password would have been changed. All right. Uh, let me see if it's real. I log out. I give my credentials. It says invalid credentials, right? Now, if I give in the new password, will it allow me? Yes, it does. So the password did change. So the CSRF attack did happen. Execute and explain SSRF server-side request forgery attack. So that's a good question, but I doubt with the resources that I have if I'll be able to execute a server-side request forgery. But what I can in fact do is I can give you those relevant resources that will help you learn and understand SSRF. I'm really sorry that I do not have those set of resources at this point for me to execute an SSRF. Uh, all right. Any other questions? Before I move further? Okay, Mr. Puneet is asking me if I can explain buffer overflow with practical example. Okay, from an application perspective, I doubt if I have the option of buffer overflow. But in a nutshell, buffer overflow is, I don't know, how do I put it from in a practical approach? I think it's a little doubtful, but I think I can, again, just like the way I am able to do it for SSRF, I think I'll share those relevant videos that you can go through for buffer overflows. Cool. I think the other aspect that I wanted to show you guys was on the other tool called as the OWASP Zap. I hope my screen is visible on this. All right. So let's say I open up, I mean, the way this works is very similar to that of the Burp Suite application as well. Just like the way you are able to do it on Burp Suite, you can manually do a security interception, proxy interception, and then do a scan or manipulate the request and then get the responses. Or you could also do an automated scan here. The way this would work is very simple. You can basically try to add in your URL that you want to attack, and then you can basically select that, and then you can basically start attacking, right? There are other certain set of parameters as to what is the spidering mechanism or what is the user agent that you would want to use and all of those aspects. But we'll not go into that deep level in this one. But in a very nutshell manner, if I want to look at this, so let's say I take this example. Let's say I take this application for now. I open up this OWASP app, right? So this is all set. Now I can straight away start attacking. So you will see that all these are different set of scans that are currently happening. So in terms of alerts, if you go in here, it will basically tell you what are the different set of vulnerabilities that it has been able to find, right? It says that application error disclosure it was able to find, right? Let me show you other areas also, right? So it says it has certain missing anti-click jacking uh, things, right? You will see what was the request that was sent, also what was the response that it has been able to receive, right? So this was the request that was sent, and accordingly, what was the response that we obtained, right? Response header and response body. Uh, in the similar lines, there are a bunch of other vulnerabilities also that it has been able to detect. For example, it says suspicious comments. Okay, this is not a suspicious comment per se. Sometimes it does end up giving certain false positives though. All right. Yeah, I think this is the way you can look at it. There's other ways also that you can certainly test this applications out. So let's say I go to a new session, all right? Uh, let me, you can basically what I basically wanted to say is once you select a particular file, you can a particular site, you can still go ahead and uh, look at certain other subdomains and then start attacking them as well, right? So once you start the attack, so for example, in this, if I go here, right click, you can basically include this into context, include the site into the context, and you can again perform other different set of attacks on top of this. So this is like a very far simpler way to look at performing a quick scan on a given application, right? The problem with this kind of an approach is the fact that this does give out a lot of false positives. What do you mean by false positives? It's the fact that the the tool will basically say that yes, this vulnerability exists in the application, but in real it doesn't. So it'll in a false manner it would say that this application is vulnerable to say a cross-site scripting, but then when you test it manually, you will see that it is not vulnerable. Okay, Mr. Sheikh say, oh yes, you haven't received the document or file as discussed. Yes, I'll club these up and then I'll send out the document together. Why do we use the spider option in the OWASP Zapper? Yes, the spider option is basically to sort of get into the different set of pages that are available. Like for example, in this particular domain that you will see, right? There are different, there would be different pages if you look at the sitemap, right? There is your home page, there is documents, there is pictures, and bunch of others, right? First, it would get, and get start to first it'll go ahead and find these different pages that are there, the different directories, and after that, it will basically start looking at what are the possible set of vulnerabilities that are existing, right? And that's where you would want like a spider. So that technique of getting into different pages based on links and different directories is what we call as spidering, right? And yeah, that's where we would need such a mechanism. So in Zab report, how to find out uh, in if okay in that vulnerability, okay, so these things that you see here are basically vulnerabilities, right? Like something like missing anti-click jacking header to an extent is a vulnerability. Cookie with no HTTP flag is a vulnerability. Okay, so cookie without same site attribute is also a vulnerability. Okay, if you see here, the server leaks information, right? It does leak certain information disclosure here. So these are vulnerabilities as well. So if you give it enough amount of time, it would basically go ahead and find out a couple of more set of vulnerabilities in the application. Okay, yes, Mr. Sheikh is talking about the sample reports. Of course, I did bring this up. I didn't wanted to sort of disclose any organization's security report. So for that, I did look out on the internet if there is any sample reports that are available. I'll quickly share this link over here in the chat section for everyone to sort of open this up. Let me try and see. So try accessing this sample report. This should work, right? Let me download it and try and see. I don't know, interestingly, it is not downloading for me, but give it a try. It should be able to download. If someone is able to download it, please let me know. So it's just a simple Google search away if you are looking to download a particular report. This is interesting. Maybe it's a doc file and my firewall on the system is not allowing me to download it. But yeah, I think it's very straightforward. This is an example report that you can basically see. And I think this user, he's also given us the details as to how do you want to write a pen test report on their GitHub page as well. So you can check this video out. I think that should also help you out.
Yeah, Nikhil,
All right. So Mr.
participant just typed that
Yeah.
it's down to the mobile.
Yes, it is downloading in the mobile with desktop mode on. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Mr. Puneet. I think if it is helping you, uh, that's great. Uh, I think, yeah, Mr. Sheikh is saying if I can explain same-site cookie vulnerability. Sure, sir. So the way same-site cookie, it's not a vulnerability. Same-site basically is a cookie flag, right? Yeah, I think you had seen this in the findings over here, I believe, right? Cookie without same-site attributes, right? So if you look at the cookie values, right, usually, so I'll open the request here first, try to come up with any key values, right? So basically, in any of the requests that you see or the responses, uh, it's purely the responses, right? So the set cookie, once you see, basically set cookie is basically helping the browser understand that, okay, so this is your session ID, this is your cookie value, and this is something that you will have to send back for every request that you're going to send to the server, right? This is a very fundamental understanding because that's how the server will understand, okay, once the user has logged in, the server will give the user this session, the cookie value, and that browser will basically has to send back every request it makes. Now, what here, there are certain other flags that come with cookie is something called as same-site cookie. There's also something called as HTTP only. There's also something called as secure cookie, secure, right? So what these do is the same-site cookie basically ensures that the application or that is using this cookie is only accessible. Again, there are again two parameters to the same site or as well. One is the lax, one is the strict. When you apply the lax, it means that applications, like for example, if it is www.abc.com and the cookie value is accessible to abc.com and other applications as well for that matter, right? But when you do a lax, it would basically ensure that only the subdomains of abc.com, something like say mail.abc.com or drive.abc.com, only those subdomains associated with this abc.com are allowed to access the cookies, right? But if you do a strict, it means that other than abc.com, no other domains are allowed to access the cookie of those application, right? So that's where your same site attribute would come into play. HTTP only is a flag again that comes as part of your cookie response header, response parameter, is the fact that it ensures that the cookie value is not accessible to any external JavaScript, right? There's one more parameter which is called as secure, right? That gets added into the same line. What it basically does is once the secure flag is added, it basically ensures that the cookie is traveled between the systems only via secure channels, which is your HTTPS and all these secure channels. So that's what it ensures. Uh, yeah, I think these are the different sort of flags for cookies, and that's how they work. Okay. Any other further questions for me for today?
Your participants are requested to please type their questions in the chat box.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sheikh. Okay. All right then. I think that's pretty much from my side. I had for today. Uh, I hope this has been helpful, and I hope this has been of some knowledge to you all. Uh, I would certainly share the document with Abhishek as early as I can within a day. And yeah, I think that would contain the rest of the details around the things that we have spoken today. Of course, I think one of the participants had also asked about SSRF and also on the buffer overflow. That's something that I'll add it as part of this document and we'll also share it.
Thank you very much, Nikhil, for this very comprehensive two-part series webinar on VAPT. I'm sure
Yeah.
this was certainly, the series of webinars certainly witnessed a lot of discussion and a lot of interaction between the instructor and the participants. And that is a very good indication of how engaged they were. Would you have any other comments?
Yeah, I think this was really a great interaction that I've seen as well. I think I'm happy that we were able to bring this level of interaction. I think there's still quite a lot of questions that are coming in. Yeah, Mr. Sheikh asked how are these reports that are usually generated? Yes, these reports. Okay, one, these could be manually done as well, and there are tool-specific reports that get generated as well. Like for example, if you take up other bunch of other tools that you will come across, like for example, MobSF is one of them when it comes to mobile application security. So there are certain automatically generated reports, and there are manually written reports as well. So I believe the reports that I've shared here are manually written. These reports would have different parameters that need to be added. Yes, the MobSF is freeware and it's an open source tool. Yes.
So I think we'll just wait for a minute in case any of the other participants has any questions. Please feel free to type them in the chat box. Nikhil, we hope you enjoyed interacting with the participants.
Totally. I loved interacting with everyone here. I think I'm really happy that people are enjoying this and then they're genuinely asking me questions. So I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I think quite a few of the participants were very enthused with your offering in the first part, and they've all come back today to attend the second part, although, we had to postpone it due to unforeseen circumstances. We'd like to thank all the participants for having attended this webinar, which is now today's webinar is the 50th edition. It's a kind of a landmark for us also. We'd like to thank all the participants for having attended this and made this a grand success. And from everybody at CySecK, we'd like to wish all the participants a very Merry Christmas 2022. The Christmas weekend is just coming up. But just before that, we had the assessment. So before I put in the link for the assessment, anybody having any question, please feel free to type it out in the chat right now.
Yeah, I think Mr. Anil has and Ma'am Shilpa has also asked if I could guide on how to do runtime application self protection for an application. Okay, so the way that would work is again, if you look at any application, uh, I mean, if you look at the SDLC flow, right, the software development lifecycle, there are certain aspects or there are certain security integrations that are done at every stages. So one thing that I can suggest here is it's a bit of an advanced concept. This is something called as IAST, which is Interactive Application Security Testing. So this is something that happens while the application is on the runtime, right? And this would test, and then it would basically send those findings to the developers, and they would basically fix it. But from a runtime protection perspective, of course, you would have your web application firewall that will ensure that your application is protected from different injection kind of an attack, right? That is there, and also there are certain DDoS protections that are also available. Something like something called as Cloudflare. You can just Google it out. You'll be able to get an understanding of those. So all these aspects are available that could be utilized.
Okay, there is a question from Puneet, an example for runtime application security, Nikhil.
Yes, an example for runtime application security. So, uh, I think from an implementation perspective, if you look at it, I think I would say WAF would help, a web application firewall. But from a testing perspective, if you see, I would say IAST would be helpful.
So, okay, with that, we have a wrap on this webinar. Nikhil, thank you very much for both of these webinars and for patiently staying on and answering each participant's question. I'm sure we will invite you to take some webinars on some other aspects of cybersecurity as well. And we hope you
Yeah,
enjoyed it as much as we did.
indeed, I did enjoy it really very much, I would say, because I think I've seen a great amount of interaction here. So I would certainly want to come back again. Thank you so much.
And we would like to have you back too. So, yeah,
Sure, sure,
so with
sure,
that,
Abhishek.
I request you to please sign off while I discuss the
Thank you.
modalities of assessment with the participants.
Sure, Abhishek. Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, good evening, dear participants. It is now time for the assessment for this webinar. I'm going to post the link for the assessment in the chat box. It's a Google Forms link, and this link will remain active for only 1 hour. I repeat, I'm going to post the link for the assessment in the chat box. It is a Google Forms link, therefore, it's preferable that you use a Gmail address to log in and to give the assessment. And please note that the assessment shall be open for just 1 hour. Yeah, so I have posted the link for the assessment for this webinar in the chat box. It is now 5:15 p.m. and this link will cease to be active with effect from 6:15 p.m. or 18:15 hours IST. I request all of you to please attempt the assessment. The assessment contains 15 multiple choice questions and there is no negative marking. You have 1 hour time, which I think is sufficient time for you to attempt all the questions. Please attempt all the questions and please share the link with any of the other participants who would be interested in taking the assessment. Yeah, so there is a request to share the documents. Once we receive any further materials from the speaker, it would be our endeavor to share it and make it available to the participants. We will check how this can be done, but please give us a little bit of time, given the Christmas and New Year vacations that are going on. However, let me assure you that the moment we receive anything from the speakers, it will be our endeavor to make it available to the participants at the earliest. To the CySecK control room, please ensure that the test remains active only until 6:15 p.m.